like as a beginner, what you should do, right? You should just get started. Try to understand the domain first, then try to understand the technology behind it, how the world is solving and what you should be solving. But if you're just a starter fresher, you will not get those chances. You'll just be put into a project. Whatever is the project, start doing it, but start learning the how, why of it, right? Why you are doing something about it. Be curious, start following the industry, you will do better. And as you mentioned, healthcare is now getting the attention. Healthcare, digital health or healthcare IT or health tech is now getting the attention that it deserves. And the next decade, or say a decade or two, there will be a lot of transformation in digital health, healthcare IT, and overall healthcare delivery, right? So it's a good time to be in healthcare, build your career in healthcare. And FHIR is just one of the mechanisms to get in, right? Digital health is far bigger than FHIR or any other standard starting alone, right? So, but yeah, it's one of the good standards, one of the standards that is on the uprise. It will do good if you learn FHIR, right? I'll keep it there, all right? With that, so we start today's session. And today's session is a continuation of where we left off yesterday, okay? And this is also a wrap-up session, which means that we are closing our month-long FHIR Basics learning. I will call it festival, right? Because it was more of a learning, sharing, going through the flow. And different people had different takeaways, depending on how they joined, how much they did, right? So today, it's more of a closure, okay? So yesterday we talked about recapping FHIR. We talked about as an implementer, if you are building a FHIR server or you are building a FHIR client or you are doing something in FHIR, what are some things that you should take into account, right? Continuing that, the next thing is, which is very, very important when you are building anything in digital space, right? And more so if you are doing it in healthcare is the security and the privacy and the clinical safety, right? Whatever you build has to be clinically safe to use, correct? Has to be clinically safe to use, should respect the privacy, appropriate privacy of the patient, provider, and whoever the stakeholders involved, and definitely has to be secure, correct? So today what we will look at is like, what are some of the mechanisms or what does FHIR say about this security, privacy, and clinical safety, okay? We will also take a peek into Smart on FHIR. Smart on FHIR is a standard, again a standard which is a combination of smart. Smart is a standard specification. It's on its own. And how does it get used in FHIR? And Smart on FHIR has widespread use. So when you say FHIR is being used in Apple Health Kit, for example, right? You are seeing FHIR being used in Apple Health Kit. FHIR being used in US ONC regulation, 21st Century Cures Act. FHIR being used as Azure APIs or Google APIs, right? Behind that, if you see, the authentication, authorization, and the launch flow is driven by Smart on FHIR specification. So if as an app builder, as a server guy, as somebody, right, we should also take a look at what is Smart on FHIR. So we'll not go into details of Smart on FHIR, that we can do it some other session. But here we will at least introduce you to what the world of Smart on FHIR is, where to understand more about Smart on FHIR, right? And what are things are possible through Smart on FHIR, right? And we'll close the session there. We will have our discussions. And that's all. And that's the agenda for the day, okay? And we will see like how we can stay connected and how we can do certain projects. Like one project idea just came in, right, from Deepak. So we'll continue that, okay? So before we get started, the usual ritual, if you are not on Zulip, please get on Zulip because our discussions post this sessions will continue on Zulip and on LinkedIn. So you might be missing out because we will not be able to send out emails and other things post this session. So get on to Zulip if you're not yet on Zulip. So today we will be talking about more about FHIR security, privacy, and clinical safety. We'll talk about Smart on FHIR, and we'll talk about how do we continue our FHIR learnings. Again, now, the next one, if you are not on LinkedIn group, FHIR community group, please get on there because FHIR community LinkedIn group and the Zulip chat will be our primary mode of communication or keeping in touch once the sessions are over, right? So take a moment, join the group. If you have already not joined it. And this is the last session, so you can have tea, coffee with you as I'm having the tea. All right. So now let's get on to, so this is important. Again, as I was talking to Sonia, right? So we will be sharing the slides, and the slides are not ours, as in like they're not our intellectual property, or we have not created them from scratch. We have taken the learnings from all the veterans in the community, right? And then we have added on to it or made some necessary modifications. So definitely these slides are yours. We will be sharing it on Zulip. You can take a look at it, use as needed, right? And just make sure that whenever you're using, make sure that you have these attributions in place, right? So that people know that you're building on top of the community. Okay. So these things we have covered. We will not be going through it. Any of the slides, if you need some clarification, just let me know. And we're rushing through the slides. I'll not be speaking. This we covered yesterday in detail. Yes. 555 rule was an important rule or an eye-opener for anyone who is getting into healthcare IT. Just remember, while it is easy to get into healthcare IT, healthcare application development requires a lot of domain experience, a lot of nuances around it. So don't get frustrated if your app does not work on the first time in the field. And if you get a lot of customer feedback, be patient, listen to them, things will work.
So rather than 555 rule, it should be tetra-5 rule.
Yes. Yeah. We talked about all this. We talked about storage. We talked about FHIR. So we will get started from FHIR security and privacy. Okay. So as you know, FHIR is a data exchange standard, right? Primarily, it is dealing with how do you encode the data, or how do you represent the data in resources, and how do you share the data. The sharing of the data, exchanging of the data can be through FHIR APIs, through document mechanism, through messages, so on and so forth, right? Now, whenever you're dealing with data and exchange, security and privacy becomes paramount, right? Because unauthorized access to the data or something which should not be shared, if you're sharing, right? These things can cause you problems. And if you see, there is a notion that interoperability is detrimental to security and privacy. There's a notion, it's not right, it's a myth, right? But you will hear this fallacy a lot, that if I start data exchange, my servers will get compromised. Patients' privacy will get compromised, right? Which people who are ignorant, right, will talk about it. So today what we'll talk about is like, what are the mechanisms that are there to protect your data when you are doing interoperability or data exchange. All right. So as you see, the first thing is like you should be using encryption, right? So when you are doing data exchange, some things are like common sense, right? You should encryption, you should not allow active scripts, you should maintain audit trails, right? So that in future, whenever there is a suspicion, you can go back and see the trail and figure out like what went wrong. Correct. So these are the basic things. FHIR does not prescribe or does not build any of its own security standards. What it does is it leverages the already industry-wide, industry-adopted standards and implementations, right? So if you see, FHIR talks about OAuth, it talks about like authorization, TLS, HTTPS, all the things that are web standards, right? Or they are industry standards. FHIR does not recommend or does not build any one of its security standards, right? So it just uses the whatever is available in the industry. Like so, OpenID Connect for authentication you can use. Then for authorization and all, you can use OAuth 2, and so on and so. For encryption, you can use the normal algorithms that are available, right? So that okay. So FHIR security, there is a page dedicated on the FHIR specification with FHIR security. And these are the three or few things that FHIR is talking about when you are dealing with security. These are the important things, right? The first one, timekeeping, right? And this we have seen a problem. What happens is if your server and the clients, or if the systems that are there, they're not in sync with the time, you can have big problems, right? So security problems can arise, even workflow problems can arise, right? The first thing is the times should be in sync, right? Not as much of a problem in India, okay, because we follow one time zone, right? But if you see US and others, right, they have multiple time zones, and there is a problem. And even in India, what we have seen is some of the servers will be in UTC, but the clients are in Indian Standard Time, IST, right? When the communication happen, and if you are not factoring in that 5.5 hour offset, there will be a problem. So the first thing, building app, you should have the time in sync. Communication security, everything should be encrypted, right? Using web standards like TLS. Okay. Authentication should be must, right? OAuth is recommended, right? And if you are building a client app and a server, right? So you are building applications, right? What FHIR recommends is please take a look at Smart on FHIR specification and consider using it wherever appropriate. And that's why we will be looking at Smart on FHIR today. Okay. Authorization and access control, you should pay attention to not just authentication, but after authentication, authorization, right? So authentication is, hey, I am Satyam, and you, the server says, okay, you are server, right? So authentication is right, but it does not do anything more than that. Authorization is more about, is Satyam authorized to access these records, right? And what are the access controls, right? So those are the things which authorization and access control deal after the authentication has happened, right? FHIR also has a concept of security labels. So each resource in the metadata will have a security label, right? In that you can define the confidentiality of the resource, or the privacy of the resource, or the purpose of use of the resource, right? So that is a mechanism that FHIR also gives over and above what is available like OAuth and other things. Audit, we know digital signatures. Digital signatures are more to verify that this record or this things was created. So you sign with digital signature, more useful in document world that we have seen. Attachments, labels, inputs, narrative. Input validation is important, narrative validation. So narrative, right? So one of the challenges, right, is narratives. If you see FHIR narratives that are there in resources, right, they allow XHTML, correct? Now, since it allows XHTML, there are chances that you can inject scripts in there, right? JavaScripts in there, or any malicious scripts in there. So whenever you are handling narratives as a client or a server, pay attention how you are handling the narratives and don't accidentally execute the scripts. Okay. So I think we know privacy, like what privacy means. Privacy is more about what the respect to one's individual information, right? That's what privacy is like. And privacy principles, privacy by design is something that FHIR talks about. And there are multiple resources that can be used. The first one is a consent resource. A consent resource is a specific resource in FHIR which can be used to represent patients or a user's consent, right? So if you want to capture somebody's consent, right, that I as a patient have allowed this person to access my health records. If you want to have this kind of a consent to be recorded, right, consent resource you can use, correct? And in India, we don't use the consent resource. We have our own implementation of a consent artifact. But consent resource and the consent artifact in India are more or less uh, same or similar, right? Then security labels are there, which you can use to further notify sensitivity and the confidentiality of the resources. So for example, if a resource is there and you want to say this resource is sensitive and need not be allowed to be seen, right? So you can have a label in the resource in the metadata saying that this is the sensitivity level of this particular resource, and this can only be exposed to certain use cases. So those labels we will see, and based on the labels, again, labels are just text. Okay, remember that. It's on the implementation, how well you are implementing the server and the client, right? That you can enforce the privacy, right? And for everything else, you need to have the audit event, right? So that who accessed, when accessed, what was the change made, everything is captured in the audit. Okay. Now, so we saw what FHIR is talking about security, general principles, what are the guidelines it has given. We also see the FHIR mechanisms that are there. Now, one thing to note is, as the FHIR does not mandate any specific deployment architecture or any specific architecture of implementation, implementations are free to choose how they are implementing security also, right? So these are the three ways that we have the FHIR documentation mentions, where you can see how security is implemented. In the first way, so this gear is the security system, right? Here, the security is in between the client and the server. Okay, a security layer is there. In the second kind of deployment, the client is handling the security, correct? And in the third one, if you see, the security is handled by the server, correct? So these are the three different, not three different, but these are the different ways that are shown in the FHIR specification, how people are handling security. There can be other ways. But irrespective of how you are handling security, the things remain the same. You have to do the authentication, you have to do the access control, you have to do the audit logs. Now, which model you want to select depends on your specific use case and your specific constraints, right? So there is no right or wrong answer. That's what I will say, right? But it is purely a decision of your architecture based on your current scenarios and your current use cases, and maybe the application domain also, right? So take a look at that. All right. So FHIR also provides a guidance onto what are the applications or what are the resources which fall under different security domains, okay? And how you can decide on their access control. So for example, And this is by category, by security category. So if you go to the FHIR specification on the resources, you should be able to click on by security category and you can get this. Okay. So what it means. So the things that are in anonymous category. Okay. This means that these particular resources do not have any identifying patient or individual identifying information. Okay. And they can have an anonymous access. So once people have authenticated, when the system has authenticated, you can choose to just expose these. Okay. Business security category means these particular resources may not have any individual or a patient specific data, but they might have business sensitive data. Okay. For example, there is this charge item definition where you're talking about charges that is their catalog, which is your business catalog. I think location also will come in here, so on and so forth. So business specific data, but not actually patient or individual specific data, correct? So now you can think of what roles should be allowed to access this, right? So when you're designing your system, you can think of the appropriate security or privacy access controls that you want to apply. Then, if you are talking about patient sensitivity, patient sensitive data, then there is a list of resources that have patient identifying data. Okay. So these are in the patient security resource category. So these are the resources which have patient data. So handle them appropriately. Then there is a category called individual. In that, though it doesn't have patient data, but it has data about individuals, right? So it might have identifying information, right? For example, practitioner. So it will have practitioner's name, age, and other things, right? Whatever the practitioner resource does, right? So though it is not a patient information, but still an information about an individual, right? So you can think of how to handle that. And then there are certain events which are not classified, so they don't fall under any of these security categories. So you can choose to handle that. Again, this is from the perspective of an implementer, as an architect, as a designer, right? When you're designing your security system, when you're designing implementation of your FHIR application, you can choose, because unnecessary authorization also might lead to certain complications in terms of performance, for example, right? So it's important to know what resources represent what type of data, and based on that, you can choose like what kind of privacy or authorization you want to implement. Okay. Then there are three specific resources that you can make use of when you're dealing with security and privacy. Okay. First is consent. We talked about it. This is to record consent of a patient or a group for a particular purpose. Okay. Then there is a provenance. Provenance is more about approving a change to a particular resource. So every resource can have a provenance resource. A provenance resource only tracks the information about when the resource was created, when the resource was modified, when the resource was versioned, and all these things, right? And who created, why created, right? So that is provenance. So every resource can have a provenance resource tied to it, right? Just as like saying somebody keeping a watch, okay, this resource was changed, this resource was created, this resource was updated by him or by her at this point in time, right? So that is the provenance resource that can help you in when you're doing a incidents tracking, right? And the last one is audit event. It's a broader event which talks about overall operations that happened in that particular server, correct? So it will talk about who logged in, when logged in, what was the privacy, which resource was accessed, and anything and everything. That is the audit event, right? So provenance, you can choose for each and every resource. Consent is for recording consents, and audit event is at a system-wide if you want to have audit, correct? So we will take a pause here. Okay, if there are any questions, we'll take these questions and then we'll move forward. Because so far what we have done is basic system design or basic application development, right? Now we will get into the clinical safety part of it, right? So before that, if there are any questions, we'll take up.
Yesterday it was discussed, but I have forgot. Like one person has asked, like seeing the patient story how, at a glance, how to identify the resource. There is a guidance, you see it. Documentation.
Can you repeat again the question?
I'm saying that yesterday one person has asked regarding like, see, there is a patient story, okay, and looking at it, I need to identify the resource first. What could be the resource? So there is a manual or the documentation or guidance, helping hand to find it out. What was that?
There is a resource. I think we'll get to the FHIR specification. I'll show you. And this was one of the exercises that we did on session 2, I guess, right? On the second weekend, where we had a use case of a patient, of a boy, 12-year-old boy coming in with some kind of a problem. And then doctor did a prescription of it and he developed some allergy and all. And we went back and mapped all the resources which were involved in that. Right? We did that exercise as well. But
Yes.
we will
For
see.
laboratory, it was specimen resource.
We'll come to that. We'll show you where it is, right? And how to identify also, we'll talk about it. Okay. Any specific question on security? Deepak, no question, no question. I think it's all LinkedIn. So no questions. So what we will do is we will move to clinical safety. Okay. Okay, conformance related safety checks. We'll come to this. All right. So when you are doing clinical safety, right, some of the things, and the full detail is available here at the conformance thing. But the first thing that we need to check is, you remember modifier elements are very, very important, correct? Because they say change the meaning of the resource itself, right? So when we are implementing, have we paid attention to the modifier elements and the modifier extensions, right? Very important. Please, whenever you are implementing, and that's a mistake that a lot of new implementers do. They treat all the attributes as the same, correct? The clinical safety guideline says, please pay attention to the modifier elements and the modifier extensions very closely because they change the meaning of the resource that you are handling, okay? Then you should also take care of the life cycle of the resources, like the status of the resources, like what are the resources, right? Status codes, whether it is active, inactive, entered in error, and so forth, right? Take a look at that. Basic safety and security, time sync is there or not, communication is encrypted or not, authentication and authorization is there, access control you have verified, right? Integrity you have done. So those things. So let's now go into the conformance checklist, okay, before we get on to Smart on FHIR. So what I'll do is I'll get onto this. Let me know if you can see my browser. Can you see my browser? No?
Not yet.
Not yet. Still presentation.
Okay, just a minute. So I'll stop my share and then I'll and resume again. So in the meanwhile, I think, does it make sense as an implementer, what we are covering today?
Yes, very much.
Where did it go? Okay, I think I'll not go through the link. We will go through a proper way. So we follow, everyone can follow that. So I'm here. I am sharing my screen and I'm sharing my entire screen. Okay. You should be seeing my web page, correct?
Yes, visible.
Visible. All right. So the first thing that is open is actually what she was asking for, right? So there is a guide to resources, okay? Resource guide.html in FHIR. If you come here, you can find basic guidelines saying that if I'm dealing with laboratory results, like for example, I have to represent blood panels with CBC, with differential, etc., then what resources we can use and where to find the relevant resources, right? If you have to do imaging studies, CT, MRIs, which one is important, right? So on. If you have to record allergies, intolerance, clinical diagnosis, condition, and so on and so forth, right? So this is a page that can be handy. More importantly, if you go to the resource types, given the use case, right? Given the use case that you have, if you pay attention, the names are closely related to the use case. So for example, a patient resource will have information related to patient demographics, practitioner, and so on and so forth, right? That way. So you can take a look at it. Now, I was talking about security category. You see this? This is the security category. Okay. And let's take a look at what security category means, correct? So the slide that I had taken is from here. So you can see everything here. And so what we discussed, business sensitive resource, individual sensitive resource, patient sensitive resource, and so on and so forth. Right? How to minimize this screen? Let me go down. Okay. So now we go back. So any question on the security categories before we move to the next one? No questions, right? So now we go to the clinical. There is a question that Kapil has. Okay, we can discuss after the event. Definitely. So there is a web page called clinical safety and how to reach to this. Go to the documentation. In the documentation, there is a tab called safety and security. Okay. In the safety and security, you will find security label, signature, and clinical safety. If you click on clinical safety, you are here. Okay. What it says is implementer safety checklist, right? So just read this first and you'll understand the scope. Okay. So whenever you're developing an app, you can use this as a checklist. Okay. Saying that, okay, you are handling these things or not. Again, these are just guidance, but something which is better than you doing nothing, right? So use it as a checklist. So there is conformance related checklist, there is time zone, there is search related checklist for clients, for servers. A lot of these things are there, right? Take a look. Okay. This will help you save a lot of trouble when you're getting into the field. Okay. Like even other safety, how are you handling the course? How are you handling JSON? Okay, under store format header, are you supporting or not? So on and so forth. A lot of things are there. But remember, security in FHIR is still an evolving thing. If you go here, I think that's where somewhere we'll write. It's not written here, but security still is something that is being evolving. It's evolving as the standard is evolving, as the use cases are evolving, right? So use these as guidance. Definitely these things that are recommended, you should be using to have your basic baseline, right? A minimum baseline. And above, over and above, whatever security you want to follow, you can follow. Whatever privacy more you want to follow, you can follow, right? But this should be your baseline security and privacy guidelines understanding, right? And I'm sure many implementers do not follow majority of these checklist items, right? For example, when you're deleting a resource, what should be done, right? And definitely the new ones, anyone who is getting new into healthcare and health IT, these things are very important for you to take a look. All right. So we did a look at resource categories. So I'll close this. We did take a look at the security. I'll close this. We did take a look at this. Okay. So we talked about security labels, right? So security labels, they will be represented like this in your resource. Okay. You have a patient resource, you have the meta. Okay. Under that meta, there will be an attribute called security. And this security is a code, right? Coding, right? Security label is represented as coding data element, right? Which means that it will have a system, it will have a code, and it will have a display, correct? And then the system you can figure out. So for example, here, it is defining the confidentiality as restricted for this particular resource, correct? Then here, the resource meta is saying it's a delete after use. Again, some code is there in the metadata, right? Now you want to know what are the codes available, right? So these are the codes available, right? So you just go to that particular coding system and you'll come to know, right? So for example, confidentiality, right? So there is a low confidentiality, moderate, normal, and these are the code and this is the value, correct? Same thing for information sensitivity, correct? So if you want to code sensitivity, purpose of use, if you want to specify the purpose of use of that particular resource, right? You can use a security label for that, right? Now, one question comes up is the security label repeated or just one? Can somebody identify and tell me? In Meta, the security attribute, right, that is there, is it a repeated entry or is it just one-time entry? So it's optional with one use or it's optional with multiple use? That's an exercise. Let's do it. Answer in the chat. Okay. Take 1 minute. In the meanwhile, I'll also open that. But anyone who has figured out, just put it there. The question is the security attribute or the security label in Meta. Is it an optional with one repetition or is it an optional with multiple repetition? If I have to find that out. Okay. Is it optional with multiple or is it just so let's go to the patient. Okay, patient is having meta. Let's go to meta. Meta has meta, and this one has security. Security is a coding resource with 0 to start, correct? I think most of you got the answer, correct? Good. So this is also an exercise that where we try to check whether the understanding and if some question is there, whether you're able to figure out or not. Yeah, good that I see no wrong answer. So that's a very good sign. Everyone has understood how to read the spec. And in case there is a doubt, you can go on. Very good. Yeah. Is it optional and multiple or is it mandatory and multiple? Give me that answer. And why do you say so? Okay.
Optional, and the second one you see it because it is starting from 0. It is
Okay.
not mandatory.
Very good. Very good. Okay. I think you guys have understood how to read the FHIR spec. Can you also give me an example of a modifier element? Just give me a link, I'll go there. Selva, you don't do it. So we talked about in the security modifier is important, right? So we have to pay attention to modifier attributes, right? Give an example of a modifier attribute. Or where do I see all the modifiers? You know what a modifier is, right? Good. So why are you going to build.fire? I think you're doing a Google search, right? I don't want a Google search. I want a normal one, man. So if you're going to build.fire, I think you're going from Google search. Is that not right? So, but yeah, what you're saying is patient disease, right? Let's go to patient disease. All right. So we are in patient and we are going to patient diseased. Okay. How do we identify that it's a modifier attribute? How do we identify it's a modifier attribute? Aman or anyone? So by looking at the spec, right, how do you know it's a modifier? So you said diseased is a modifier. I accept it's a modifier attribute. Yes. Okay. Good. So the question mark and exclamation says that it's a modifier. Good. Now I need to know what are the modifier attributes. Can I take a look at all the modifiers? Let's do it here. Okay. So this is about status. All right. Now, good. So you have understood modifier also. Can somebody explain what is a modifier? So we talked about modifier attribute and we talked about modifier extension also, right? What is a modifier extension? Just write in or you can speak also. What is a modifier extension? Silva, you can speak if someone is speaking.
Modifier extension can have domain resource, text, content extension, and modifier extension.
What is a modifier extension is the question.
Cardinality 0 to star, asterisk, extension. Extension that cannot be ignored.
But what is a modifier extension?
Like the extension which I will be writing to give the output as a modification or not.
Any
Something which is predefined?
no.
Okay.
I think you both are there, but exact thing is so just like modifier attributes are there, na? Same thing, modifier extension. So if you apply a modifier extension, it has properties or values that can change the meaning of the resource, correct? That's what a modifier extension is. All right, I think good grasp. So we'll come back to our presentation. If you have any question on reading the spec and all, we can spend a few minutes since we are here, right? Any question on how to read the spec, where to find stuff, please let me know.
No, if you can define modifier, it's again would be helpful.
Very good. We can go to modifier. So let's go to modifier. So we went to patient. We went to say modifier. Okay. So is modifier. Okay. Is modifier is a Boolean property that is assigned to the element either here. So if you read this, okay, and if does not explain, I'll explain you. So read this. In short, a modifier is an attribute which you cannot ignore. If the value is present in the modifier attribute,
then you have to.
It has a clinical reference. It has a clinical relevance, right? It might change the meaning of your particular resource altogether, right? So you cannot just ignore the modifier attribute, correct? If the value is present, okay? For example, status, right? In most instances, is a modifier. For example, where is the status? Here, active is a modifier, right? So it means that whether the patient record is active or not, right? It's a modifier attribute. So if the patient record is not active, you make a Boolean as false, then maybe you don't want to consider this particular resource itself, correct?
Yes.
So that's how the value means you cannot, if the value of active is present, right? You cannot ignore that value because it will change the meaning of your interpretation, right? Let's take another example. For example, diseased, right? Diseased is a modifier, right? Now, if diseased attributes value is present, correct? It will have an implication on your overall processing, correct?
Correct.
Because if the data is there, diseased, say Boolean is true, right? It means the patient is dead, correct?
Right.
You will have a different mechanism of interpreting that, right?
So does that mean that whenever there is an is modifier, the value should be true or false only, and
No,
then
no,
it will
no. You can have status as a modifier also, correct? Which can have multiple things. We'll take a look at that. Let's see any other. So modifier does not need to be
here back
Boolean
here
only. Yeah,
on
it
the
can be
down there was one more.
which
Just
one?
scroll down. Just scroll. Yeah.
One,
So
right?
link.
Link. So link is another. Yeah. So here it is saying any resource that you can put in here, right? It is a modifier. So it means that, so link attribute, right, is a modifier attribute. What it means is, okay, in a patient resource, link attribute says that this patient record, the current patient record, is linked to some other record, some other resource, right? That is what the link means, correct? Now, if the attribute's value is present, you cannot ignore it, correct? Because
Right.
it is conveying a message that,
It is
by the way,
inherent.
the record has something else, right? Because the link, if you see, it can be replaced by replaces, refers to, or see also, right? Maybe this data that is there replaces, means this particular data is replacing that or is replaced by that, right?
Right.
So modifier, the underlying thing safely you can assume is, if there is an attribute that is modifier true, then ignore it at your peril. That's what we can put it, right? If you ignore, there can be repercussions. So never ignore a modifier attribute or an extension.
More clear.
Hope that clarifies, right?
Yeah. Very helpful. Thank you.
If there are no questions, let's move to the slide deck. How do I go to the new share? I go to the slide deck. Okay. The slide deck is starting from beginning for some reason. Let me know what you are seeing in the slide deck.
The very first slide.
The very first slide, right? Okay. Let's. Okay. So now we have seen security, we have seen FHIR, we have seen everything, right? Now we want to touch base on a very good specification. And when we are talking about security and privacy, I think this specification deserves a mention because it some way or it builds on top of the security and privacy infrastructure that the FHIR leverages on, correct? Now, think of EHRs as platforms. So think of you have data platform, okay? And then there is a market. I'm just giving you a hypothesis and a way where smart on FHIR can be done. And then we will see a lot of other places. Think you have multiple apps, right? Which can access the data that is there in your EHR or a HIS or EMR and can give you different views of it or different usage of it, right? something like there are mobile apps, right? Just like mobile apps, if you have EHR apps, right? The same data that is there, you have captured a patient's data, right? But you can use multiple apps to do multiple things, right? In that case, what you can do is you can use a technology called SMART. So you can use it, right? Now, what SMART enables is SMART gives you a framework of how you can launch or how you can integrate a third-party heterogeneous apps to your application infrastructure, right? So, suppose you have an HIS and you're building an app, okay? So you can imagine a third-party developer building an app, right? They do not have any idea of what is your way of accessing your HIS or EMR, right? So if both of you follow SMART specification, then this third-party app can be launched from your particular system, or this third-party app can actually take advantage of the data in a secure and concise manner. That's what Smart on FHIR does. Okay. So it gives you a specification of how to launch third-party apps, how to do authentication and authorization, and how to do access control, and then how to use tokens and scopes and all, so that you can very well control the data that is being shared. That's what SMART provides. Okay. Now, SMART is already used in so many. If you see on the right-hand side, I have given you some hyperlinks, right? So these are the applications that people are using SMART on. So these are enabled through SMART on FHIR. So for example, Apple, if you have an Apple Health Kit and if you are in the US, right, or wherever there are FHIR servers in the hospital, SMART enabled, right? Your Apple Health Kit can fetch your data from your hospital's FHIR server, right? That is enabled through SMART on FHIR. Similarly, the current bulk data specification or the Cures Act that ONC or CMS has mandated, they have mandated use of Smart on FHIR to access patient data or access bulk data, right? Similarly, you can have the Microsoft Azure Smart APIs are there, or you have the Google APIs, and all these things are there, right? So they're all using Smart on FHIR. So any third party which wants to leverage the existing FHIR infrastructure, they are leveraging Smart on FHIR, because Smart on FHIR provides the security and privacy infrastructure on top of the FHIR, right? So here is an example that I have quoted from cloud.google.com, their healthcare APIs, right? If you read. So Smart on FHIR is data standard that enables applications to access information in the EHR, okay? An application developer can write a single application that connects to an EHR that has been adopted by the standard. Now, what will happen is, the best thing is, you as an app developer can develop an app, right? Suppose you are very good at visualization, right? So you can visualize, say, growth charts or something like that, and you are a standalone app developer, right? This Smart on FHIR can enable you to develop an app, okay, using smart specifications, and then your app can be plugged into any EHR, Epic, Cerner, Athena, NextGen, anyone, right, who is supporting smart specifications. So suddenly your app can be used in any of the EHRs, right? So it will talk. What does the specification say? Specification say how you can authenticate to the FHIR store, how you can retrieve the data, how you can display the data, right? Smart primarily uses OpenID for authentication and OAuth2 for authorization, correct? So this is the core focus of smart apps. If you see, you have clinical systems on the right. It has a lot of data, right? And you have healthcare apps on the left. They need data to work, correct? Smart provides a way of how you can integrate the apps to the EHR in a seamless fashion. It not only talks about the data, just it not only talks about the data piece, it also talks about the UX integration, authorization, single sign-on, and so on and so forth. Meeting खत्म कर ले, फिर लेके आएंगे, ठीक है? Okay. And when I share the slide deck, I think you can go to this particular link and get the full detailed product presentation of this. I think Selva Kumar, you have a hand raised. Does it what says?
Yes,
Yeah.
Satyam. So we have clinical systems on the one side, and the smart is implemented on top of clinical system, and
Yes.
healthcare applications using that API and the authorization detail credentials provided by clinical system, and it's interacting with the clinical system, right?
Yes.
But the healthcare applications can have internally any kind of authentication if they have any already implemented.
It
They can
doesn't matter.
be on anything. Right?
It doesn't matter, right? So, for example, see, Smart is implemented by most of the legacy EHR systems, right? Epic, Cerner in the US, right? They all have smart APIs, correct? So, which means that internally they might be using something else, right? But at least for the external world, they have implemented a smart specification, right? So, which means that for external world, they are supporting OAuth and OpenID, correct? So from there, it could be like this. You can please authenticate Satyam, right? So Satyam sends his credentials. You can take it in whatever format, specification format is there, right? And then internally, you can validate in whatever method you want to validate that credential, correct? And return success or failure, right?
Right. Okay.
So that way.
So the reason I asked this question is we have another single sign-on authentication system on top of our applications. So if that can provide authentication and authorization, like still it can be used that
Yes.
as well. Like,
yes.
but
So,
Smart is like custom developed for particularly
no. It's user.
FHIR or
No. It's just a specification. It says like how you can use the existing authorization and authentication mechanisms, right? It just lays out some rules around that. Okay, there is nothing custom. So, for example,
which means, I mean, if a single sign-on supports OpenID and
right, it will work. Yes.
OAuth authorization, in any authentication system you can use on top of FHIR server or things. But
it should
FHIR
support
simply recommends.
OpenID. It should support OpenID and OAuth.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good, but this is very interesting. I think the project that you guys are planning to start in the community, right? Maybe you can baseline on Smart on FHIR. Okay, this is a timeline. The timeline of Smart is similar to what is FHIR. It just started somewhere in the same period. Okay, around 2009, but it's a separate initiative. It was an initiative from Boston's Children's Hospital because they had multiple systems, data systems, and they wanted something to be which is context aware and which can be shared, right? So that's why the initiative started. They developed the framework, and then somewhere when the FHIR came in, they found synergies, and then they came together and made it Smart on FHIR, right? And as you see towards the later part of the timeline, towards the right-hand side, all the major leading vendors, AWS, Google, Microsoft, have adopted Smart on FHIR because they found it useful, and they already had the infrastructure of OAuth and OpenID, so it made sense. And also the government CMS and ONC started adopting or prescribing Smart on FHIR. Okay. This is a different view of the same timeline, which is more focused on how patient access was enabled over a period of time through Smart on FHIR. And you see different timelines, different rules that are there in the bottom, right? So Argonaut, HL7, CMS point of care, and how Smart on FHIR is getting on. So in 2021, they had this vaccine credentials initiative, California was there, and so on and so forth. You just see that, right? So the wide adoption of Smart on FHIR. So one of the catalysts of FHIR adoption is also Smart on FHIR, right? Because it allows disparate systems to not worry about the security and the privacy, right? It provides a standardized framework, which FHIR just says like leverage smart. Okay.
So
Now,
basically, when we talk about smart on FHIR, this work as a mediator, right? So when we already have an FHIR server setup and our HIS is utilizing FHIR, and if I want to communicate with any other third party like Epic in this example you have given, so I just have to implement or add on the FHIR into my system, and it will able to communicate with Epic, right?
yeah. So Smart on FHIR again is not an application, right? It's just a specification, right? It says like how you should use. We'll see how you will
Okay.
see how you can use OpenID Connect to authenticate. What will be the launch flow like? So, for example, if a patient, right, for example, request for access, right? What should be your flow? Correct. How
So-
should authentication flow happen? How should the authorization flow happen?
So being what I have understood by this 4 or 5 slides, that it is actually need of the time, right?
Yes.
So why it is not by default, or why I have to additionally implement this in a way where Smart on FHIR has been.
All the FHIR servers today, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the FHIR servers today, right?
Yeah.
By major vendors have
Yeah.
smart capabilities built in. Okay.
Right. That was I was thinking about.
So if you think of all the FHIR server from the leading cloud vendors, right? AWS, Azure, Google, right?
Yeah.
They have the smart capabilities built in. Because if you want to build apps, right, on FHIR servers, right, you have to take care of security and
Exactly.
and privacy. Just give me 1 minute. क्या हुआ?
Yeah.
क्या move करना है? I'm having a meeting ना. 2 मिनट दे दो, meeting खत्म करके बात करते हैं तुमसे, ठीक है? 2 minutes. Okay, uncle is there. Okay. So we'll come to know. We'll just take a look at all the specs, right? So
Okay.
if not today, we'll have a dedicated session on the Smart on FHIR. Okay, where we'll
Sure.
go on session and all. This
Thank
is
you.
more about like this is more to trigger your curiosity and say, means this would be a question in everyone's mind. Okay, this is FHIR server. Okay, it talks about the APIs, it talks about data, right? But then there is a big question, right? How in the world are we going to access data over the internet, correct? There has to be some security mechanism, right? There has to be some privacy mechanism, correct?
Yes.
So that's where Smart on FHIR comes into play, right? How
Right.
disparate systems can talk to each other in a secure, authenticated, authorized manner.
So it's more like in standard where you're when you're communicating with any third party, either it is a mobile or it is any third party
Yes.
app.
Yes.
You nailed it. Okay.
Okay. So for more information, you can go to smarthealthit.org. It has a very good detail on the spec. The spec can be from beginners to advanced level also, right? It also has a very good developer handbook, which shows you step by step, like how you can build a smart enabled app, right? If folks are interested, we can have that as one of our activities. It means one of our continuing learning activities, right? We can build a small app, right? On a maybe on a Google Cloud or a Azure Cloud, anyone, right? And we can see, right? If you're building it for a Google Fire Store, right? Does it work in AWS or not? Correct? That's a claim, right? So we can verify that. So if anyone is interested on Zulip, please start a thread, and we can choose any language that people are comfortable with. It will be primarily a front-end app that we'll be trying. So any front-end tech stack is good enough, right? We have a lot of, so if we are using standard frameworks like React and others. I think there are already Smart on FHIR implementations available, so we can use those libraries. If not, we will implement step-by-step lines. Okay. So don't message here, please. Message on Zulip because this will go away, right? So on Zulip, please start a message thread and just put in there so that later on we can figure out, or later when we can reach out, right? Maybe Selva, if you can start a message right there, and others can just do it, correct?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So this is a smart. So there are a lot of
And
apps that are already built in. Okay. So this is an apps gallery where you can see a lot of apps that are there. I will go there. We'll go to that. Okay. What next?
Sajjan, there is
Yeah.
hand raised from Dr. Subha.
Please go ahead, doctor. Sorry, I'm not able to see the people's.
Hello, can you
Yeah,
hear
go
me?
ahead. Yes, yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to give some inputs on Smart on Fire,
Please
on
go
what I
ahead.
have understood and I have worked a bit on a few years back. So, from a clinician's perspective, like what is a big deal having an app if when I'm already having my huge monolithic EMR system, right? So let me play the role of a pediatrician. So in these old epic systems or all these old EHRs, they have this way of only capturing the height and weight of a child. I'm going back to the same growth chart example, and usually typically doctors want to view it as a graph, how the trend is, but a lot of these systems have been very old systems. They do not show all these graphic nicely done in picture graphs and all like the typical new breed apps, right? So how can we get these hand apps and the whole features to these systems? So that was the whole thought process why this whole technology came in. And as you can see the names, substitutable medical applications. So how is it if I give this graphic feature to a doctor by substituting his original, the lay simple background of just entering the age, I mean the height and weight, and then he having to not being able to visualize anything, vis-a-vis now I have this whole interface of this graph. So that's where the whole thing came up, where you are substituting the old feature with this new app, but not losing the ground of branching or authenticating all the whole he having to log into another app to check this. So they have come up with this where the name goes substitutable medical apps, means you are substituting this function of this EMR with a new age app. So the doctor to doctor, it's very seamless. He will typically still be in his EMR, but with the click of a button, he is able to view with the same data that he has entered previously. He's now able to view the whole in a graphic interface. So that's the substitution, and he's again, once he closes, he's going to come back to his EMR. So the whole workflow is very seamless. So that's how the whole initiative started. That's where these large EMRs have come up with, okay, how about having various other functions, because in medical clinical note taking and many other places, especially specialists, you need a lot of calculations to be done when you have to do something, which a lot of these old applications and even the new age specialty applications do not have those functions, meaning the doctors or the nurses have to do it manually, offline, in a paper or something, and then enter the input again. So how about having an app that can branch out, do the math and come back, because you have already given the data there, and it takes into a lot of other considerations like the male, age, and a lot of other inputs from the already existing data. So that's where the whole thought process of smart on fire apps came up, and now it's a huge thing, right? I mean, again, developers have to be very wary about really does it add value, right? And is and other thing is it now really enhances the preference of a clinician. So to my knowledge, some apps, individual clinicians like how you set your individual preferences for a template or something. Now doctors can have their own app. So depending on your login, you can launch your app, by a clinic, by a specialist. So that's how the whole marketplace has grown up now, and that's why the whole the EMR systems have come up with their place where they can have their apps, and the the whole place where you can test your apps with their EMRs and all that. They have opened up basically, because it doesn't make sense for the EMR system to come and develop all these, by themselves on a day. It will take years and centuries maybe. So with this, boom of apps, they're now actually making them part of the whole, care process. So that's the whole thought process, and that's the reason why it is named as substitutable medical applications, meaning you're substituting a particular feature of a EMR with this app. So you can have multiple apps integrated into the EMRs actually. And this app can be serving many EMRs, not just Epic. It's not hooked to one Epic. The same app can be used by clinicians from other who are using other EMR systems. That's the reason where it is reusable technologies. You know. Thanks for the
Thanks,
opportunity.
Dr.
This is something I thought I would share.
These are the things that definitely the context matters. Thank you. One thing remember, I was just thinking of an analogy, right, while Doctor was saying. So think you have stock apps, right, on your mobile phone, right? And you download from the Play Store some different app doing the same functionality in a better way, right? So, for example,
Exactly.
photos or something, right? So you have a different app which does the same thing. So the data is already in the phone, but this app is actually doing some more functionality for you, right? Same thing in the context of healthcare, right? That's what smart enables. And that's where substitutable medical apps comes into picture, right? So you can substitute one app with the other app using reusable technology, right? The technology is reusable. Go ahead. Somebody has raised a hand. What is the hand? I think somebody had raised a hand, right?
Thanks, Satyam.
Yes, Sridhar, go ahead.
I just want to maybe illustrate with an example. Now you already have mobile apps which measure your daily activity, your heart rate, and so on. Before your consultation, you can actually share this with your doctor if they have a compatible system, and your smart app actually does this bridging of sending data from your mobile app to the EHR or the consultation's clinical notes, whichever is there. Or maybe I can get one more step forward, is that today or commonly blood glucose is monitored using your fasting blood sugar and your post-lunch, post-meal blood sugar. And that report, you take it to your doctor and your doctor sees it. You also have today apps which can measure your blood sugar continuously, the CGM meters, which there is an app on your phone as well. And you can build a bridging app or a smart app to send this data, share this data with your nutritionist or your doctor, and he can nuance your dosage accordingly.
Definitely, I think that's a good idea, and those are good analogies, right? So what we'll do is we'll quickly go through the next steps, and then we'll go to the smart. We'll explore the smart health IT app store for a few more minutes, right? So what next? So as we draw close to our FHIR Basics learning sessions, right? Definitely we want to continue our journey, okay? And definitely we want to be in touch, okay? So some of the things that we can definitely start doing is try out some FHIR starter projects. And that's where I think Smart App and other projects can be something that we can get started with. And where I think everyone in the ecosystem can participate. We need clinicians for the domain knowledge. We would need developers. We would need even some product analysts or business analysts to help us carve out the use cases. So I think it will be good community projects which we can do. So that's something that will be there for us to explore. If you are interested, just put in your comment in the Zulip. We will definitely start sooner. Then, if you want to continue your own learnings, definitely go ahead, explore HL7 courses. If you are interested, go and take the FHIR certification. Participate in Connectathons. So Connectathons, we did not touch base in this particular session, but Connectathons are a very good events or a place, right, where different implementers come together, they test their implementation, also test the maturity of their of the FHIR specification itself. So it's a very good learning festival. As we talk, the FHIR Connectathon is taking place in, I think this time it is in Dallas, right? If I'm not wrong. So it's happening. So typically it happens with the FHIR work group, HL7 work group meeting. So HL7 work group meeting will start from Monday. So Saturday and Sunday, the previous Saturday and Sunday are typically the Connectathon days. That's the US Connectathon. In India, we are planning to have the Connectathon somewhere in August, September. So dates are not yet finalized. We are working on the logistics. So dates, stay tuned, stay connected. We will circulate the date of the FHIR Connectathons in India. One of the things that you can play around with to understand, have a better understanding of FHIR resources and their interplay with other resources is to actually try out the clean FHIR, right? Remember, you had a hands-on exercise last weekend where you had a scenario and you were building resources with references and all, right? You can actually use clean FHIR to visually represent like what kind of interplay those resources have with each other. If time permits, we can see that. Try out the tools, join the implementer community. And the message from us is just try, learn, implement, share, right? And stay connected. So that's where I think our session stops. Now, if there is enough interest, what we'll do is we'll explore the smart health IT app gallery for some time. And if there are any questions, we'll take up. Else, we'll have we will disconnect for today, and definitely we'll come back again on our FHIR startup projects. Okay, so with that, I stop my presentation and thank you. This is my name is Kumar Satya. You would know already by now, and I'm available on LinkedIn. You can connect with me. Please follow the FHIR India community on LinkedIn. We can get connected. If you have any questions, anything, feel free to reach out to me. I think everyone would have my number. If you don't have my number, just ping me on LinkedIn. I think I'm fairly responsive. I do respond quite quickly. So let's stay connected.